Govindo Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchkana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Vanchakalpa Turibhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Okay, chapter 9, text 12. We'll recite the Sanskrit and then the translation. Beginning with chapter 9, text 12. Mogasha moga karma no moga jnana vichetasaha rakshasim asurim chaiva prakritim mohinim shritaha. Translation. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demoniac and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. Text 13. Mahatmanastu mampartha daivim prakritim astritaha pajantyanyanya manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Text 14. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridha vritaha namasyantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. Translation. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. Text 15. Jnana yajna chapyanye yajanto mam upasate ekatvena pritaktvena bahuda vishvato mukam. Translation. Others who are engaged in the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, diverse in many and in the universal form. Text 16. Aham kratur aham yagya swadhaham aham ashodam mantroham aham aivam aham agnir aham hutam. Translation. But it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I am the butter and the fire and the offering. Text 17. Pitaham asya jagato mata data pita mahaha vejam pavitram omkara riksama yajra eva cha. Translation. I am the father of this universe, the mother, the support, and the grandsire. I am the object of knowledge, the purifier, and the syllable Om. I am also the Rik, the Sama, and the Yajur Vedas. Text 18. Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi Nivasa Sharanam Sukrit Prabhava Pralaya Stanam Nidhanam Bija Avyayam. I am the goal, the sustainer, the master, the witness, the abode, the refuge, and the most dear friend. I am the creation and the annihilation, the basis of everything, the resting place, and the eternal seed. Text 19. Tapam yaham aham varsham nigranam yustrijami cha amritam chaiva mrityuscha sad asachchaham Arjuna. Translation. O Arjuna, I control heat, the rain, and the drought. I am immortality, and I am also death personified. Both being and non-being are in me. Text 20. Trayivija mam somapaputa papa yagya ishtapa swargatim prartayante te punyamasadya surinjalokam ashnanti divyam divi deva bhogan. Translation. Those who study the Vedas and drink the soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. They take birth on the planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. Text 21. Tetam bhuktva sargalokam vishalam kshene punye marchalokam vishanti evam traitar mamanu prapana gata gatam kama kama labante. Translation. When they have thus enjoyed heavenly sense pleasure, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, through the Vedic principles, they achieve only flickering happiness. Last text, text 22. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasyate tesham nitya viyuktanam yogakshemam vaham yaham. Translation. But those who worship me with devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So we're getting the most confidential knowledge in chapter 9. So we'll read text 12 and see what Srila Prabhupada has to say in the purport. Translation. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So we're hearing a little bit about those who don't really know Krishna that much. So in the last verse, we hear, fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. So Krishna is giving us information about what happens or what is happening to those who don't recognize him, and what is happening to those who are demonic and atheistic, or just think, or materialistic. They just think life is meant for enjoying the senses. So purport. There are many devotees who assume themselves to be in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, but at heart do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as the absolute truth. For them, the fruit of devotional service, going back to Godhead, will never be tasted. Similarly, those who are engaged in fruitive pious activities and who are ultimately hoping to be liberated from this material entanglement will never be successful, either because they deride the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, persons who mock Krishna are to be understood to be demonic or atheistic. As described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, such demonic miscreants never surrender to Krishna. Therefore, their mental speculations to arrive at the absolute truth bring them to the false conclusion that the ordinary living entity and Krishna are one and the same. With such a false conviction, they think that the body of any human being is now simply covered by material nature, and that as soon as one is liberated from this material body, there is no difference between God and himself. This attempt to become one with Krishna will be baffled because of delusion. Such atheistic and demoniac cultivation of spiritual knowledge is always futile. That is the indication of this verse. For such persons, cultivation of the knowledge in the Vedic literature, like the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads, is always baffled. It is a great offense, therefore, to consider Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to be an ordinary man. Those who do so are certainly deluded because they cannot understand the eternal form of Krishna. In the Brihad Vaishnava mantra, it is clearly stated that one who considers the body of Krishna to be material should be driven out from all rituals and activities of the Shruti. And if one by chance sees his face, he should at once take bath in the Ganga to rid himself of infection. People jeer at Krishna because they're envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their destiny is certainly to take birth after birth in the species of atheistic and demoniac life. Perpetually, their real knowledge will remain under delusion, and gradually they will regress to the darkest region of creation. So we get a pretty heavy statement in the first sentence of this purport. There are many devotees who assume themselves to be in Krishna consciousness in devotional service, but at heart do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as the absolute truth. That's me. I haven't accepted them. I'm initiated, but I still feel myself pretty low, especially when surrounded by so many great devotees like everyone here. So yeah, accepting Krishna in the heart, or opening the heart for Krishna to enter, seems to me like the imperative function for us here, especially in the temple, because in the temple we're given the opportunity to maybe more of an opportunity, maybe less, it depends, to share Krishna consciousness with everyone. So the more we open our heart to Krishna and accept him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth, then the more effectively we'll be able to share Krishna consciousness. And maybe for myself, it's one reason why I find it so difficult to share Krishna consciousness is because I haven't yet accepted Krishna in my heart so much, or I'm embarrassed by something or like that. Especially when going out alone. When surrounded by devotees, it's a little easier. We feel we're together, and there's some spiritual potency there when there's two or more devotees. And even Christ mentions it in the Bible, where there's two or more, I will be there. So, we understand in Krishna and from the Bhagavad-gita that Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtati, that Krishna or Paramatma is always residing in a heart, right next to us as the spirit soul, as consciousness. We're residing right next to Krishna in the body. So he's always with us. And we can use that as a motivation for us to spread Krishna consciousness more and more, and to bring this nice bliss and just education on how to live life to the fullest without repeatedly doing actions that hold us back from realizing actually who we are and that we don't have to suffer. So we also hear from the purport that the atheistic, or those who don't profess that there is a God, they think there's no God. Study of the scripture is very difficult. And sometimes they're even in the scholarly field studying the Vedas. Of course, for them, they think it's all imaginary. It's some way for some humans in the past to gain power or to establish morality or so on. Of course, this doesn't actually hold up to what the Bhagavad-gita is saying itself. So there's some pitfalls in their estimation. So for them, they could keep on reading the Vedas for millions and millions of years and make no progress in the spiritual path, trying to go back home, back to Godhead. For them, it's futile. So maybe what's separating them from knowing Krishna is meeting a devotee, meeting someone who's kind to them or just gives them prasadam. And slowly, they can be transformed by the mercy of Krishna and Guru to take up this path of Krishna consciousness. We never know. I mean, what someone's act of kindness as a devotee could do to help someone progress in the path of Krishna consciousness. And we hear there's no loss or diminution on this path. So every flower they smell and every sip of prasadam water they drink can help them to advance in that. But in the end of their life, we know that Krishna smashes them in the form of death. But we can pray for them and for the strength of ourselves to keep on giving this Krishna consciousness to everyone we meet, you know. Text 13. Thanks. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Purport. In this verse, the description of Mahatma is clearly given. The first sign of the Mahatma is that he is already situated in the divine nature. He is not under the control of material nature. And how is this affected? That is explained in the 7th chapter. One who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, at once becomes freed from the control of material nature. That is the qualification. One can become free from the control of material nature as soon as he surrenders his soul to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the preliminary formula. Being marginal potency, as soon as the living entity is freed from the control of material nature, he is put under the guidance of the spiritual nature. The guidance of the spiritual nature is called Daivim Prakritim, divine nature. So when one is promoted in that way, by surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one attains to the stage of great soul, Mahatma. The Mahatma does not divert his attention to anything outside Krishna because he knows perfectly well that Krishna is the original Supreme Person, the cause of all causes. There's no doubt about it. Such a Mahatma or great soul develops their association with other Mahatmas, pure devotees. Pure devotees are not even attracted by Krishna's other features, such as the four-armed Mahavishnu. They are simply attracted by the two-armed form of Krishna. Since they are not attracted to other features of Krishna, what to speak of the demigods, they are not concerned with any form of a demigod or of a human being. They only meditate upon Krishna in Krishna consciousness. They are always engaged in the unswerving service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness. Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekaha kurunandana bahushaka yanantascha samada. No, you say? It's not samada, that's Bhagavad Prasakti. So one who's resolute in purpose, yeah, I'll just go to chapter 2, text. It's a nice verse. Here we go. Coming soon. Those who are, okay, Buddhayo Vyavasayinam. There we go. Tech 241. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one, O beloved child of the Kurus. The intelligence of those who are resolute is many-branched. So we hear in the previous verse about the intelligence of those who are irresolute, but in this verse we hear about the intelligence of those who are resolute in purpose. So their aim is one, especially in Mahatma, their aim is one, and that is Krishna. They want to know who Krishna is. They want to have a relationship with Krishna. And so they constantly endeavor to understand who he is. And so this can be kind of difficult. I know it's difficult for me to actually know Krishna, to know Krishna. You know, I was thinking about this last night when I was giving an explanation, or I was speaking at a home program, and I was attempting to recite the pastime of Lord Brahma and the Cowherd Boys, and I was just fumbling it. I was like, oh man, do I really know Krishna? I mean, Krishna's blue. He's like, Shama Sundar, blackish, like a monsoon cloud. He's got a peacock feather in his hair and it's curly. He's got a kastuba gem. He's got the marks of a lotus and a club, and other markings on his feet, gada, like a elephant goad. There's lines on his neck like a conch shell. He's got ruddy eyes. His toenails are sparkly like pearls. So we can learn so many things about the description of Krishna, but to really get to know the personality of Krishna, how Krishna is, what he does, is quite a challenge. Because first we have to get the taste to want to hear that, and also be cautious of not to fall into the trap of thinking that Krishna is an ordinary person. Because sometimes we can hear about his past. I'm like, oh, Krishna, he's this and that. But it's always good it seems to me, to keep this mood of awe and reverence to a certain stage. And also, when we develop this relationship by getting to know Krishna more and more, our desire for material things will slowly fall away. So we know when our relationship is getting more intense with Krishna, when we have no desire to pursue those other material things in our life that are a distraction. Of course, I can say this and know it theoretically, but actually for myself, I still have so many material desires that I want to pursue. And maybe there's someone else like me out there too. But we can see from the great souls such as the Acharyas, and especially the most current one, the founder Acharya of this Khan, Srila Prabhupada, what it is to be a Mahatma and what it is to be fixed in Krishna consciousness and only want to serve Krishna. And even I was hearing from a lecture class earlier today that even he was vulnerable with himself. I mean, he would say, like, I went to a movie with my son when he was a householder, and he would say things like, I wanted to take another wife at one point because I didn't like one. I didn't like her. So he said these things that are vulnerable. So for me, I can try to be vulnerable myself, and hopefully that opens up my heart even more to accept Krishna and to understand what my anarthas are. But of course, Srila Prabhupada, is pure devotee, constantly engaged in the service of Krishna. And so understanding those things can be a little tricky, but everything he says is a teachable thing for us. because he's on that transcendental platform. It's just waiting for us to have that realization about what it means. So some things that he states, we might not understand immediately, but slowly we'll come to understand that and really relish the position that he holds and gain more love for Srila Prabhupada. So for him, he was under the control of Daivim Prakritim, the divine nature. And I think that his mercy and his potency has spread to many, many devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement to also be under the control of the divine nature. Because that was his goal. He wanted to create a society of Brahmanas, and to keep propagating this Krishna consciousness. And to do that, you have to keep the purity. To keep propagating Krishna consciousness. It's not for money. It's not for fame. It's not for prestige or recognition. It's simply just to share Krishna with others and become Krishna conscious ourselves. So there was never a question who the love of Srila Prabhupada's life was. It wasn't Mahavishnu. It was Krishna in his two-armed form, having his pastimes with Srimati Radharani and the gopis. That was Srila Prabhupada's vision. Okay, we'll go to the Shri Shri Gaurani Tai Ki Jai. We'll go to the next text 14. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So we get to understand from God, from Krishna himself, what these Mahatmas do. These Mahatmas are always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, not for material things, but for spiritual things, things that are benefiting every living being. And always bowing down before Krishna. So there's always this devotion, this love between the Mahatmas and Krishna. And you can tell by what they do. There's no secret bad habits. There's no behavior behind bad doors, bad behavior behind doors, closed doors. Even the devotees in the early days, they would peer in the keyhole of Srila Prabhupada's room to see what exactly is he doing. His light is on. I can see the light coming under the door. But what is he doing? So they looked in, and he was dictating Srimad Bhagavatam, writing, or something, or chanting. He was always engaged in the service of Krishna. Constantly. Sometimes he would stay up for days straight. There's a nice pastime of this in Shyamasundar Prabhu's second volume of Chasing the Rhinos, where they flew to Australia. And for one, it was like a long flight, and they got there. It was a red-eye flight, so they got there in the morning, and then they had programs, and then for some reason he had to stay up another night, and then he stayed up another night after that. And he didn't his pace didn't change. That's pretty amazing. If I tried to do that, man, I would be passed out on the floor, right? So Srila Prabhupada was most certainly empowered by Krishna. Of course, people stay up 3 days in a row under intoxicants, but that wasn't the case for Srila Prabhupada. Unfortunately, there's pretty heavy intoxicants out there that ruin people's lives, but also make them stay up for 3 days straight or more. Okay, so I'll read a little bit of this purport. We'll see what nectar we can get. The Mahatma cannot be manufactured by rubber stamping an ordinary man. His symptoms are described here. A Mahatma is always engaged in chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. He has no other business. He is always engaged in the glorification of the Lord. In other words, he is not an impersonalist. So an impersonalist, they're always, if they're strictly an impersonalist, a Jnani, they're always involved in studying the Vedanta. And so for them, they want to understand, okay, 1990, it's not this, it's not that. The truth is not this, the truth is not that. And so they do this kind of deduction thing. And ultimately they think it's, they'll merge with Krishna at the end of their life if they study this enough, and if they can negate material nature enough, then they can merge. And actually Krishna does allow that, but we also understand that they fall back down to the material world because it's not a place where they can stay. Why is that? It's because there's no relationship. So they might be getting some form of happiness, but there's no ananda without sambandha. There's no bliss without relationship. And so the Mahatma, he's always serving the Lord in devotion, which means he has a relationship with Krishna. That's how he's able to keep going. That's how he's able to keep refraining from previous bad habits. Because you can only spend so much time by saying to yourself, no, don't do that. No, don't do this. No, I shouldn't do that. No, that's not devotional service. At some point, we have to get past that or I have to get past that myself. I have to get past that to really relish the relationship that we're destined to have as spirit souls. Where our nature is Satchit Ananda Vigraha. We have a eternal form. We have a Swarup that eventually will attain by the mercy of Guru and Krishna. So the Mahatma can keep going because he has a relationship with Krishna, and he will continue to glorify Krishna until the end of his life. Okay, text 15. Others who are engaged in the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, diverse in many and in the universal form. So others who are not Mahatmas, who are not Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, glorifying the Lord continuously, they engage in Gyan, like the Vedantists. We're after Bhakti Vedanta, or knowledge of devotional service. But there's others who are just after the cultivation of knowledge. How to classify the modes of material nature, how to look at this material energy, earth, water, fire, ether, air, mind, intelligence, false ego, how to see those. What's the difference between the mind and the intelligence? These kind of things they cultivate to come to some realization. So read the purport. This verse is a summary of the previous verse. The Lord tells Arjuna that those who are purely in Krishna consciousness and do not know any other thing than Krishna are called Mahatma. Yet there are other persons who are not exactly in the position of Mahatma, but who worship Krishna also in different ways. Some of them are already described as the distressed, the financially destitute, the inquisitive, and those who are engaged in the cultivation of knowledge. But there are others who are still lower, and these are divided into three. He who worships himself as one with the Supreme Lord, he who concocts some form of the Supreme Lord and worships that, and he who accepts the universal form, the Vishvarup of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and worships that. Out of the above three, the lowest, those who worship themselves as the Supreme Lord, thinking themselves to be monists, are most predominant. Such people think themselves to be the Supreme Lord, and in this mentality, they worship themselves. This is also a type of God worship, where they can understand that they are not the material body, but are actually spiritual soul. At least such a sense is prominent. Generally, the impersonalists worship the Supreme Lord in this way. The second class includes the worshippers of the demigods and those who by imagination consider any form to be the form of the Supreme Lord. And the third class includes those who cannot conceive of anything beyond the manifestation of this material universe. They consider the universe to be the supreme organism or entity and worship that. The universe is also a form of the Lord. So out of all those three, through my experience, at least in the United States, is that the last one mentioned is quite common. They consider nature, they like to commune with nature or experience nature. And of course, it's in the mode, nature is an elevated mode. It's like the difference between going to a bar and going to a park. It raises the consciousness. So we're hearing that's the Supreme Lord also, but of course it's lower than Bhakti Yoga. But it's still the Lord, because everything is Krishna. And he's the source of everything. Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. He's the source of the spiritual and material worlds. And so those who are in this mood of nature worship by going out in nature and exploring, and just having that idea about it, nature is the end all be all kind of thing. That's their practice. And of course, eventually they'll come to Krishna because they're participating in some kind of worship. The path might take a little longer for them, but they seem to be sometimes a little bit more ripe than those who like to worship Target or some big box store, or they spend their time in the mall or so on. They're a little bit more ripe or open to ideas, you could say. Maybe they don't take a book but they might have like a nice conversation about nature and the source of nature and the modes of material nature and so on. Text 16. But it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering up to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I am the butter and the fire and the offering. Purport. The sacrifice known as Dhritishtama is also Krishna, and he is also the Mahayagya. The oblations offered to the Pitraloka, or the sacrifice performed to please the Pitraloka, considered as a kind of drug in the form of clarified butter, is also Krishna. The mantras chanted in this connection are also Krishna, and many other commodities made with milk products for offering in the sacrifices are also Krishna. The fire is also Krishna because the fire is one of the five material elements and is therefore claimed as the separated energy of Krishna. In other words, the Vedic sacrifices recommended in the Karma Kanda division of the Vedas are in total also Krishna. Or in other words, those who are engaged in rendering devotional service unto Krishna are to be understood to have performed all the sacrifices recommended in the Vedas. That's really nice to hear, that by practicing devotional service, we, under the guidance of the spiritual master, there's nothing more we really have to get from the Vedas, because the Vedas is so vast. It's so vast. Of course, there's many helpful things like the Ayurveda, but that was kind of that Ayurveda and those practices were naturally woven into Vedic culture, how to stay healthy, what to eat. And so it seems okay to, we have to keep the body healthy in order to do service. I mean, Srila Prabhupada many times says the number one thing is health. Of course, we shouldn't become obsessed with that. We need to stay healthy to chant Hare Krishna and do our service. And so these other parts of the Vedas can be helpful. But of course, we should always keep in mind that Bhakti Yoga or the Bhagavad-gita and the Bhagavat Purana or Srimad Bhagavatam are the most important pieces of scripture for us to invest our time in, because Ayurveda is not going to take us home back to Godhead. Knowing who Krishna is and developing our relationship with Krishna and receiving the mercy of Krishna will take us back home, back to Godhead. We have that in the Bhagavad-gita, chapter 18. It's saying, Bhaktimara Abhijananti Yavanyas Chasvi Tatvataha Tatvato. I'm getting my verses all mixed up today. But he's saying only by devotional service can one go back home, back to Godhead. Bhaktimara Abhijananti. And so by that you can enter into the kingdom of God. Vishite Tadanantaram. So it's pretty clear what our main focus should be. Of course, we still have to live. And majority of people devotees who are practicing Krishna consciousness right now, they do not reside in the temple. And so they are attempting to weave in devotion themselves, and also maintaining, in the case of grihastas, maintaining the other three ashrams, brahmacharya, vanaprastha, and sannyas. So that's part of their responsibility. Okay, thanks for tolerating me. If there's any comments, I know Magadai had his hand up before. So please, comments, questions, chastisements.
Question online. Mother Mercedes asks, there was a devotee who gave a class in Chicago and said Bhakti Yoga is Jnana Yoga and Jnana Yoga is Bhakti Yoga, because without knowledge of God, Jnana, we couldn't practice devotion, Bhakti. Also, we serve, but we are studying the Vedas every day, which is striving for the knowledge of God and how to serve. So I guess I'm just not understanding where the line is drawn between the two, or more so, what separates the two.
So in this verse, text 15, Jnana Yajnana Chapyanye, it's referring to cultivation of knowledge outside of devotional service. So you can cultivate knowledge. Of course, we see many people cultivating knowledge all around us, but Jnana Yoga, specifically knowledge of the Vedas. And like I said, the Vedas are quite vast, so you could easily skip over this part about bhakti. You could just be interested in the Karma Kanda section, or the section where you try to figure out how to have a higher birth in your next life. That could be your focus. And you could miss Bhakti Yoga. But that's also Jnana Yoga. I don't know if there's any, Rishi Kumari, maybe you can make comment about this and clarify better than myself.
I can just try to add on. The devotee It's really loud. That devotee in Chicago might have been talking about in chapter 5, Karma Yoga, Action and Krishna Consciousness, where Arjuna has a similar question. He's asking, "Oh Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again, you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely of the two, which is more beneficial?" And the first verse of chapter 5. So earlier, Krishna was explaining about karma yoga, and that was chapter 3. And then in chapter 4, he explained jnana yoga, transcendental knowledge. So, sorry, the explanation I'm like going towards is a lot longer than probably what it needs to be. But in the fourth text of chapter 5, Krishna explains here his definition of jnana yoga. He says, "Only the ignorant speak of karma yoga and devotional service as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Sankhya and jnana yoga are the same." And he says, "Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both." So Krishna is explaining that pure karma yoga and pure jnana yoga are the same, and they're also the same as bhakti yoga. He's explaining that the less intelligent think that there's a difference between karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, but he's saying the rishis, the learned sages, they see all of these as non-different. Karma yoga, jnana yoga, or Sankhya, and bhakti yoga, because they're achieving either of those paths achieve the same result. So if one engages in karma yoga, is giving the what of the service. So how to serve God, what to do. Jnana yoga is giving the why to do the service to God. So when one performs karma yoga, then automatically when they begin doing the what, the service, automatically comes the knowledge of why to serve Krishna. And then when because if you're doing some service for Krishna, eventually you're going to want to know, well, why am I doing this? And who is it for? And what is he like? And how does he want me to do it? Automatically, the knowledge comes from performing the service for Krishna. And then when one does jnana yoga, or taking knowledge, then when you know why to do the work, automatically then you're going to do the work. When you know why to serve Krishna, why to do the service, then you'll go ahead and do it. So Krishna is saying that when the learned persons or the rishis, they see that these paths are the same because they're ending in the same result. If you do devotional service, or if you do action for Krishna, like chapter 3, action or karma, then and what that is you do the work, but you give up the result. And if you're going to, sorry for the answer, if you're going to give up the result, you're going to do something without being attached to the result, you have to do it out of love. There's no other way to do it. So if one does karma yoga, action for Krishna, then and they're giving up the result, then that's bhakti yoga. And if one is learning why to serve Krishna, they're taking that knowledge, jnana yoga, then they're also getting the same result, bhakti yoga.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Hopefully that was sufficient. Okay, well, we're past time, devotees. I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you so much for attending today's Srimad Bhagavad-gita class, and thanks for the question. And we'll continue tomorrow. Srimad Bhagavad-gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki. Vanchakalpa tribhascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo